Hello and welcome to another episode of Blaxit Global, the sessions. Today we are talking about everything insurance and how to protect yourself. So of course, I had to go and get an expert. And so we have Arnitha Webb, who is joining us today to deliver this rousing masterclass on how to protect yourself. We'll be talking about different types of insurance. Definitely want to invite you to have this as interactive as possible, to put questions in the chat, and it gives Arnitha and I a chance to react and respond. And we just want this to be a great interactive dialogue. So with that, I will turn it over to Arnitha to introduce herself.
Hi everyone. And so I'm so glad to be invited here today to talk about insurance, to talk about how we protect ourselves as we plan our moves, our big moves, our exits out of the United States, whether you are just traveling frequently, whether you plan on living outside of the United States 3 months out the year, 6 months out the year, 9 months out the year, or permanently. Hopefully I'll be able to answer questions on how to mitigate your risk in each of those situations. I don't think I need to say that the situation is very fluid right now with travel, and it's also very fluid with insurance. So it's really a good thing that we're discussing this because there's a lot of fluctuations. It's we need to understand the verbiage, we need to understand the policies and what they're covering, and how changes are taking place in each country on how they're granting entrance. Okay, how the rules for visas are changing. So I'm glad that we're talking about this today. Just to give you a real quick background, I've been in insurance for quite a while. P&C, life, health, all of it. But my focus now is international insurance. I've had the same concerns, the same questions, all of the everywhere. I've been exactly where you are. And so I look for the same answers and I look for solutions. I think for every challenge, there is a solution, and I am solution driven. So hopefully, I'm going to answer all your questions today, hopefully.
I'm
as
sure
best
you
as
will.
best I can, at least.
I'm guessing that we'll, probably, naturally gravitate to certain topics that'll come up, and then, there will be questions, and hopefully, you may even answer questions that haven't even been asked. But, certainly I think in this stage, right, where we are in this COVID environment, top of mind is insurance, how to protect yourself, how to protect your assets, how to protect your loved ones. How do you think about not only travel insurance, but health insurance in your new destination? But I think this situation has really brought all of that to bear. And because we're faced with our mortality in a very different way than we have been in our day-to-day lives. And so I think it's really timely to have these conversations. And also, not to digress, but, as we think about, some of these other social issues that have come into play, and we think about accumulation of wealth and like I said, protecting your assets. And so it's really starting with doing an assessment of, how do I think about that, and how do I think about that in maybe my next destination, and what that means for anyone who may be remaining, stateside, or
Right.
how that comes to life. So,
Right.
so I'm really excited for us to delve into this topic today. So
Indeed.
Arnitha, so let's maybe start with the basics. Why is it important at a high level to be insured?
Mm-hmm. Insurance, of course, is one of those things we don't want to pay for, but when we need it, we need it. No one wants to pay for the car insurance until you get in a car accident, right? I think, like you said, I think prior to COVID, we looked at travel insurance as either or. It was optional, right? We bought our airline tickets, our cruise tickets, our vacation packages. And when it came to, do you want to add on insurance? We didn't look at it as a big need. Okay. Some of it, unless the trip was maybe, over a certain dollar amount or what have you. But I think now no one should travel without it, because you really don't know what you're going to anticipate, and because situations are so fluid. But it's really in place so that you don't lose what you've already put out. Number one, you don't want to lose what you've already put out. Number two, in case of something that occurs that is completely unforeseeable, you don't want to draw from your bank account or draw from your savings or have to borrow or have to, email someone at home and say, send me a Cash App or Apple Pay because I fell and broke a tooth or whatever,
For
Um,
sure.
yeah, it's so that, you are covered in the event of the unforeseeable.
Mm-hmm.
These days, the unforeseeable is sometimes getting on a plane and before, when you got on, everything was all clear, and then you landed, and now there's an issue, with you going immediately from the airport to your destination, or you have a positive COVID test, at your destination. It's a number of things now that are completely unforeseeable. So it's just within our best interest to have insurance. But there's a difference in how we've looked at travel insurance in the past and how in the travel insurance that I'm talking about. I think there's travel insurance that covers the trip delays, the trip interruptions, the trip cancellations, the lost baggage, all that kind of stuff. That's what comes at the end of when you buy a ticket and it says, do you want to add on travel insurance? But then there's travel, in parenthesis, health insurance.
Mm. And so what's
Okay.
the distinction between, protecting, I guess, you in transit versus the travel health insurance?
Right. The travel insurance, as we've thought about it in the past, covers that trip leg,
Mm-hmm.
usually no more than 31 days.
Got it.
Okay. The travel, in parenthesis, health insurance, and that's how I'm visualizing, that's how I kind of want people to visualize it. You think about your health insurance that you have at home.
Mm-hmm.
So, you may have a deductible, it covers pretty much anything that will happen to you. That is how we should think of our travel health insurance now.
Mm.
It's not just about covering the expense of the ticket if there's a cancellation or a lost bag. It's about covering you, and not you just in terms of a medical emergency. Like I used the example of, oh, I tripped and broke my tooth. Okay. But covering you if you test positive, covering you if let's say I go over to Spain to live for 6 months, and God forbid I get a diagnosis of a serious illness. Okay. That's travel, quote unquote, health insurance. It is going to work like your health insurance at home, so that you can walk into the anywhere and be seen. Also, the travel insurance, as we thought of it in the past, did not guarantee that I was going to have an English speaking doctor.
Really?
No, it did not. Whereas travel health insurance says, I'm from the United States, therefore I am going to have access to English speaking doctors. It is going to give me a like a concierge service, if you will, where I can call 24/7 for anything. I don't have to just walk into whatever country I'm in. I don't have to just walk into the hospital and hope I can speak the language and just like don't know which way to turn. Who do I speak to? Which corridor do I walk down? I can call my emergency number with my health insurance, my travel health insurance, and they will direct me and guide me and stay with me all through every step of the way. Okay.
That's
It's
huge. That is huge because I
yes.
know that there's definitely some popular destinations that people have considered, whether it be parts within the continent, Mexico, Asia has been popular. And so, while there may be English spoken, we just don't know what that means in a hospital setting when
Right.
being able to make a informed decision
Right.
is critical and it could be a matter of life and death. And so I
Right.
had no idea that that was even part of that. Would that also then include say, for example, you were to have an accident or a situation and you needed to then or opted to be then treated back in your home country, let's say it's the United States, would that travel health insurance also have that kind of provision?
Yes, they all have that provision to a point, depending on what plan you choose.
Hmm.
Okay. I'm a broker, so I look at, different companies and different plans, and they are all similar and yet different depending on what you add on and what plan you choose. But they all have that to a degree. Just depends on which plan do you choose.
Mhm.
Now, but to speak to that exactly as it relates to COVID, there are a lot of carriers that, okay, we know what Europe went through with COVID, Italy, Spain, we know, UK still going through, Germany still going through. So let's say I'm over in the UK, I get diagnosed with COVID, my symptoms are not good, I want to go back to the States. They are handling those repatriations on a case by case basis.
Really?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. So it's not automatic because of a number of factors, because of border issues,
Mhm.
because of um, they're in such a volatile situation and they have variants. Then it's the U.S. situation. It's like, so they're not just saying, okay, here are the symptoms. Automatically, they can be transported back to the US. It is not automatic. It is case by case in the UK. And that's the thing with COVID, everything is sort of case by case, country by country, circumstance by circumstance,
Mm.
plan by plan.
Wow.
That's how
And
fluid it
that
is.
makes it really confusing. I would have, well, just hearing it, one, it makes it confusing, and it underscores why you need someone who can help guide you through and understand, like, what are you trying to do, so they can kind of help them steer in the right direction. But also recognizing that, like you said, this situation, like I said, whether it's travel, health, we'll talk about other types of insurance, that it's so fluid and can change on a dime, that it's so important to stay on top of like the latest and greatest.
I think that's why, and I know that the way I answered that may have sounded like ugh, but it's so that they can handle the more serious cases. You
Mm-hmm.
think about it, I may have a positive diagnosis and may not feel well, where someone else may be on, and I may want to come back to the US, but someone else may be on a ventilator.
Okay. And
So that case is going to take precedence, get them back to the US as opposed to the person that's, in a few weeks will probably be okay.
got it.
So that's the best way to kind of bring that into perspective. Also, it was something else you said. I think the thought just left me that I did
Yeah,
want
no
to.
worries. No worries. But
Yeah, it's fluid, but it's I gotta tell you, I personally am very hopeful and very positive about how the world in general, though, is handling COVID in terms of travel. Let
yeah,
me just say that in terms of
yeah.
travel, because they're responding and they're responding fast.
Mhm.
No country wants, think about it. Last year was like a year of the world being on lockdown. You
Pretty
know how much
much.
money was lost, right?
Yeah.
They don't want that
Yes.
2 years in a row.
No, and you're right. From a GDP perspective, we've seen, certain countries they contracted, and others initially contracted and then maybe exceeded their previous years. Like China, for example, they initially contracted,
Yeah,
and from a GDP perspective, and then
yeah,
they surpassed it, right?
yeah.
But it's because they handled the pandemic differently than the United States, for example, which we know is challenging. But along that line, do you see, one of the things that we wanted to discuss in our chat today do you see this whole topic of insurance, and maybe as an extension of that, now that we have vaccines, several vaccines on the market in different therapeutic areas, do you see like insurance being like mandatory, where either airlines or countries are saying in response to COVID, we are not allowing anyone to enter the country without some form of insurance?
Absolutely. They're already doing it. They're
Mm.
already doing it. Absolutely. There are certain countries you can't enter now without it, and there are visa requirements being changed as we speak. Just even before, because I knew we were going to be chatting today, anytime I know I'm getting ready to have a conversation, I go look for updates with my carriers
Mm.
because things are constantly changing. And I have now these are, and I always have to say this is as of February 19th, because something could have changed in the last 24
No
hours.
doubt, no doubt. The only constant in life is change.
Exactly. And the countries right now that will not let you in without travel health insurance
Mm.
is Aruba. And Aruba, you have to have coverage up to 75,000.
I was going to ask, are there certain thresholds that you should just think as like baseline standard default insurance threshold?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, okay, so Aruba is 75,000. Costa Rica will not let you in without it. Okay. And Costa Rica is one of the most popular expat destinations.
Yes, it is. It
Okay.
came out on my radar very recently. I think I said it in the group and to some people that, all these chats that I have with people during the Blaxit Global podcast or in the Facebook group. And I said, you know what? Costa Rica's now on my radar.
Let me tell you, it would be on my radar if it were not for I'm a chicken when it comes to quote unquote really living in a tropical environment. I can visit it, but I don't think I could live there because if I see a certain thing, I'm out. So I'm chicken. Okay. So anyway, but Costa Rica now mandatory 50,000 is the threshold.
Okay, so Aruba 75 and Costa Rica is
Costa Rica. Uh-huh. And for anyone that you send this out to, because I know I'm not sharing a screen, I will do a handout, a follow-up handout, or something for you to put on your website or something. Okay.
okay.
We'll keep them updated. Ecuador, mandatory now. Tahiti, mandatory now. No, Tahiti, you have to attest that you have it. You don't have to show the proof, but when you
Mm.
attest that you have it, you're assuming all financial responsibility. So don't ask them for nothing.
Ooh, wow.
Saint, Saint Martin, the UAE, United Arab Emirates,
Mhm.
Turks and Caicos, Dubai, Abu Dhabi. Those are the countries that mandatory. You're not coming in without proof of health insurance. Health insurance for that country.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that is just that, I have to take a second because, I've traveled and I've used health insurance before, but I've never had to think about it in this way. And, I originally, I mean, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, it does happen and that the borders in Indonesia open, because I did have a trip planned. But, it just begs, to think about all of the nuances that are factored in, because we're thinking, oh, I have to take a COVID test, or if I've had the vaccine, I have to show proof that I've had, my 2 doses. And, all of those things, like I'm thinking mentally, like the laundry list of things to prepare,
Yeah.
just to whether you're going on vacation or actually planning to
Yeah.
do it's either your Blaxit or even your exploratory trip for
Right.
your Blaxit. Either
Right.
way,
Yeah.
there's a laundry list, it sounds like,
Health insurance.
you need to stay top of mind. So I know we have a question that came through in the chat from Lorinda. Thanks for the question, Lorinda. Is travelers health insurance different from international health insurance?
Good question, because these titles are confusing a lot of people.
Mm.
They really are. No, same thing. Travelers health insurance, and key thing is having health in there,
Mm.
because many times if you're just like Googling travel insurance, again, you're coming up with information and results that are only talking about the travel insurance that's covering the leg of your trip, the bags, the cancellations, all the things I mentioned before. So key thing is putting that word health in there. However, I do want to say there is a caveat here, okay? Because another interchangeable title is global health insurance or
Hmm.
expat insurance, right? Expat insurance, global health insurance, international health insurance, traveler's health insurance. 4 terms. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Got my
I,
head on the swivel.
it's
Like,
like
break
it's
it
like
down.
yeah,
Break it
yeah.
down.
Now, here's the thing. And it depends on how the carriers are using these terms. For
Mm.
example, I have a carrier that uses the term travel insurance. Patriot travel insurance is what their package is, and then they have global insurance. So a lot of people who are doing their Blaxit, if they go to the site and they quote, they're like, well, I'm doing a Blaxit. This is not some 2-month trip, a 1-month trip. I'm going to stay,
Mhm.
or at least more than 6 9 months or whatever, a year.
Mhm.
um and so they automatically jump to global insurance. They think, well, that's the international package. That's what's going to cover me, right, in that country. Okay, with them, when you quote the global insurance, you are quoting at a threshold that's starting at $1 million, and you're quoting for like an entire hemisphere. When they're using the word global, they're not talking one country. They're talking an entire multitude of countries, an entire region of the world when they say global.
Oh.
So with them, the Patriot travel insurance is for the person that may be only going for 30 days or
Mhm.
the person that may be staying for up to 3 years. You're customizing it, and you're customizing it for the country you're going to.
Got
So
it.
if
So you would want to keep, like, if you're planning, like for me, I'm planning on perhaps country hopping,
Mhm,
leaving the country, but spending, maybe 3 months in one place, 6 months somewhere else. So
absolutely.
it makes sense to then think very strategically about where you plan on going and then having, the right insurance to meet that need.
Exactly. So
Got it.
like the Patriot plan is perfect for that. They do have a globe hopping plan too, but I like the Patriot plan because you're in such control. So if you're going to go to a country for 3 months, you go and you quote and you go, okay, I'm in Costa Rica for 3 months. You can either buy that 3-month plan up front, or you can even buy that month to month and just renew it at the end of each
Oh.
month. Yeah, you're really DIY. You're doing it yourself. And then, oh, I'm gonna go over to Aruba for a
Mhm.
month. I'm gonna be there. Okay, so now switch that to cover you in Aruba for a month. Oh, I
Mhm.
want to go over to Austria. Now I'm going to go to Austria and I'm going to stay there for 2 months. Now do the next 2 months for Austria. With their plan, you can really, as you are navigating, and because like you plan on doing that, I had a full itinerary when I had a plan like that, but then I wanted some flexibility. So sometimes I decided, oh, I'm not going over to Prague. I'm going to stay here a little longer. Next I'm going to go here. I'm going to switch some things around with that particular carrier. And since you're in such control, you just go right into your portal, your My IMG portal. You go right into, you don't even have to call me. You go right into your portal and go and just, extend your stay somewhere, or
Mhm.
say the next month I'm going to be in Austria, and you get your policy for Austria.
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize it's that easy. So, one question I have as a follow up, because this is a great conversation that we're having. So let's use that as an example. And I'm in Austria, and I've kind of done the country hopping thing. I want to come back stateside for a period of time. So is it typically that your whatever insurance you use, but let's use the Patriot one for example, when you go back to your home country, the country that you have your passport from, is that insurance not valid in your home country when you're at home, or is there variances?
Yeah, it's variances by carrier,
Hmm.
but with Patriot, I think if you come back to the States for like 2 weeks, it'll cover you for like that 2 weeks, but then not unless you then switch it over to that you're in the US.
Ah,
Now, here's the thing though. Here's the thing. Understand that the United States is one of the most expensive countries for health insurance.
yes, it is.
Yeah.
No doubt about that.
Yes. So so keep that in mind. Secondly, um as a matter of fact, I'm going to back up. Yeah, I think it'll cover you for 2 weeks, just 2 weeks with them.
Okay.
But typically your international insurance, as a rule of thought, don't think of it as covering you when you come back to the States. It is only covering you when you're outside of the country.
Yeah, that's an important distinction.
It really is. When a carrier, an international carrier like IMG, is offering US coverage, it is usually for people who are entering the United States who are not US citizens.
Ah, okay. That is also very important to know because typically, and I'm thinking, and I mean, everybody knows I have not made, well, while I do travel, or did before COVID, I've not lived abroad as yet.
Uh-huh.
Is, a lot of times people talking about, wanting to leave everything behind, either moving abroad, and deciding to start over somewhere. Either they have a job or don't have a job, being a nomad. And so as I'm thinking through what you're saying, it's very important to factor in. You may be also saying, okay, I'm leaving the US. You don't have any more health insurance. I now have this global coverage. And it sounds like being clear on the fact that that global coverage does not cover you when you do travel back, which most people do, travel back to the States to visit family or attend with business or whatever it is. So it is very important to be clear on that distinction, because you could find yourself in a really unfortunate set of circumstances, like you said, because healthcare in the United States is, even when you have health insurance, is expensive.
Exactly.
Let alone when you're abroad. And through the Blaxit Global podcast, I have such great conversations with people in different countries. And they often tell me that, either they are, have some level of, insurance or protection where they are, or I guess I should say, it's often a cash situation where you have, maybe a tooth that comes out, and then you're just, it's so small, the amount in comparison to like what that would cost in the States.
Yes.
It's often a cash transaction. But I think the
Yes.
thing that you're underscoring is to really read the fine print.
Yeah. And I think too, to kind of speak to what you're saying, depending on what country you're going to, a lot of times people will look at it like, well, healthcare in general is very cheap in that country. So, well, in some countries you're not going to have the option of foregoing this anymore, because again they're changing this.
Exactly.
But the thing is, it has been, I don't necessarily have to have health coverage because it's so cheap. If I break a tooth or whatever, I can pay out of pocket because it's very cheap. And that is one way of approaching it. But again, the health insurance is meant for you to have quote unquote special treatment. Is meant for you not to necessarily just walk into the local clinic or their government hospital and hope for care or try to get taken care of. It's so that you pretty much have carte blanche and you know that you're getting taken care of and you know that you're going to get the best. It's so that if you need a hospital room, you have a hospital room and it's of a certain standard, that things things are going to be explained to you. You know that your drugs are definitely covered. You know that if it's something more serious than a broken tooth, that you don't have to panic. Excuse me, got something in my throat.
Yeah, no
So
worries.
And I think for me, when it was one thing when I was sort of just doing my exploratory travel.
Mm-hmm.
Then when you start thinking about really blacksitting,
Mm-hmm.
like really covering your behind,
Mm-hmm.
like for real, for real.
Yeah. If we're talking about insurance in this context, we would hope that you're like
Right.
for real,
Thank you, babe. Thank you. Thank you.
for real.
Yeah. When you're really, that's when you go, you know what? Yeah, I need insurance.
Yeah, I mean, legit. Like I have, I have, not to digress too much, but like I take cholesterol medication,
Hmm.
and I have for years, right?
Hmm.
And so I always make sure that I have my meds with me, when I'm traveling. And thankfully, I don't have any chronic conditions. But like recently, I had a guest on the podcast who has multiple chronic conditions, but yet she's on her retirement world tour, and has had unfortunately some long stays in hospitals because of her condition in different parts of the world, where they did not speak English. And so it is, depending on your situation, whether it's foreseen or unforeseen challenges that can occur. And to your point, you want to be able to at least have that peace of mind, because that's what insurance does. It's just
That's right.
it mitigates the risk and gives you peace of mind. Obviously, not carte blanche to run around
Mhm.
reckless, but
Right.
also to know that in the event that something were to happen, that you're taken care of,
Right.
in a manner that you would maybe as close as you could get, or in some cases better than you would in your home country.
Yes.
So with that, I know there was another question
I
from
saw, yeah. Hmm.
Adalia. Many foreign carriers seem to have lots of waiting periods. Very true. If you develop a condition after the waiting period and want to switch providers, does that condition now count as a pre-existing condition? In this situation, is it better to stay with the company where you survived the wait period before developing the illness? That's a great question.
Okay, so um, I don't have any carriers that have wait periods.
Oh, okay.
So so I'm not familiar with those. Um, Maybe that's why I didn't select them, because they had wait periods. I don't know. Because
Mm,
I do, before I broker or go in with any partnership with a company, I do look at really very closely what they're offering, and I kind of evaluate. Um, I don't need a multitude of carriers. I just need some good ones.
mm,
So I don't have any that have waiting periods. So I'm not familiar. The only waiting period that I have with the carrier has to do with income protection, which is
yeah.
another type of policy that maybe we'll have time to talk about.
Mhm.
But in terms of your health coverage, all of the health carriers that I have are day one once you're insured. Now, that said, let's talk about pre-existing.
Mhm.
Pre-existing, pre-existing. Depending on what policy, which carrier and what policy you're applying for, determines how they look at pre-existing. Pre-existing, but managed, if you will,
Okay.
um, is really not a. It's almost a non-factor in a sense. Um, Pre-existing, but with no hospital stays within the last 60 days, um, is another factor. Now, I'm not an underwriter for these carriers, so I'm giving you the broad view that underwriting will look at with
Got
pre-existing.
it. Mhm.
Okay, I'm not giving you the you know, I'm, I'm not the underwriters, but this is how, if I'm taking an application, if I'm looking at an application and being familiar with just in general what the underwriters will look at for a pre-existing, yeah, if it's usually no hospital stay within 60 days, um, and whether or not the underlying condition is managed.
Got it.
Okay. Hmm.
Got it. Got it. And so
She
Ellie also
says,
said she has Mexican insurance.
in this situation, is it best to stay with the company? Okay, let me also speak to the carriers that I deal with. You only your medical exam, if one is even required, because it's not required for everyone.
Okay.
If it is required, it is only required at time of application. That's it. You don't go through medical underwriting again. So even if your health was to decline, it's a non-factor. You're still covered.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah.
Even at renewal.
Even at renewal.
Oh, okay.
Even at renewal, you do not go through underwriting again.
Got it.
Okay. Um, and with one of my carriers, there is even an option to go into a category of just being covered for your lifetime. If you get your coverage before the age of, I think it's 65 with them, and you keep it for at least 10 years, I think it takes you into a category of you're just covered for life. You don't even renew anymore. You're just
Wow.
end of life. Yeah. So these policies, quote unquote, international health insurance policies, again, there are tons of options. The most important thing is to look for one that covers your needs. That is the most important thing. If you have a chronic condition, make sure it covers your what your needs are. If you know you have certain certain things that run in your family, if you know cancer runs in your family, it makes no sense to buy an international health plan that doesn't cover cancer treatments. God forbid, God forbid if you get a cancer diagnosis and you're living outside of the United States, you don't want to have to come back to the United States just for that. You want to be able to be covered for whatever it is you need. You also, another thing that's a huge factor is mental health. Okay. You want to make sure that, any type of mental health is covered. You want to make sure if you get pregnant, childbirth is covered. All of the things that come along with just living the different stages of our life is what you're looking at in these plans. And you just want to make sure that the plan is speaking to your specific needs. Okay. That is the huge difference between a typical travel insurance plan versus a travel health insurance plan. Travel insurance is looking at the short view. Travel health insurance is looking at the long view.
Yeah, that is huge. I mean, that was like light bulb. Because I'm like, wow, and that's why I love having these conversations, because it is such an education, and also for me as well, is it also illustrates why it's helpful in my mind that the value add of having someone like you step us through what the different nuances are in the decisions and the factors when making, considering and comparing, because you have obviously more relationships with these carriers and understand, the technical terms versus, obviously in this internet age, everything's on demand, kind of DIY. You could DIY yourself into
misinformation,
right? Into misinformation in a situation that could have been avoided had you had proper counsel. So I hope that, everyone, and I see the questions coming in, that the big takeaway is really having, someone who understands your situation and understands the nuances of the industry, and obviously all of the changes, and keeping a pulse on those, to guide you through, what is a very, very important decision to protect yourself. So I know there was another question from Lorinda. Do you recommend a particular type of international policy to cover urgent care or ER visits for visits to the US? I know you talked about like a 2-week distinction for the US, but that actually is a great question. So say you were abroad, and I know you mentioned that most policies don't cover you when you come back to your home country, but say you were to come back for an extended period of time, 3 months, let's say, how do you have to think differently about that insurance for that time period?
You have to, I would assume that my international plan is not going to cover me if I'm coming back for that length of time,
Okay.
because most of them are not.
Mm,
They are meant for those who travel extensively, live or work abroad. It cannot replace a U.S. policy for a U.S. citizen.
got it. So if you are a US citizen, which most people in the group are,
Hmm.
and they are coming home for an extended period of time and they don't have, the only policy they've had or maintained is some type of international policy, how do you protect yourself when you're home and you may not qualify for maybe certain programs that are government, funded
You
programs?
you're going to have to rely on what the U.S. offers. You're going to
Oh,
have to go into,
wow.
yeah, yeah,
Wow, that is huge. That is
yeah,
huge.
yeah. That's really what happened to me.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't think I was going to be back this long. Uh,
So how
I mean,
long have
I got
how
boxes
long
all
have you
around me.
been
I'm
back?
ready to go again. I'm ready to go. But yeah, you have to rely on, you have to go back to life as it was before you left and
Wow.
go and apply for US insurance.
Oh, okay. So that means like something like getting on to the health
The
exchange.
health exchange and yeah.
Got it. Okay,
Yep.
that makes sense. That makes
Yep.
sense. But that's
Mhm.
also something to keep in mind. So, if that were the case and you were to come back for an extended period of time, so and it's okay if you don't know the answer to this one, but um, is just your mere reentry into the country for an extended period of time, would that qualify as a qualifying event for you to get insurance? But or should you be thinking, and I'm really trying to really benefit the masses here, if you're coming back, should you be paying attention to when open enrollment is for the health exchange so that you time it? If you are going to come home, maybe you want to come home around October because it's open enrollment.
Yeah. Yes and yes.
Okay.
Again, again, everyone's situation is different.
Mm,
And if it is really pertinent to me to not have any gaps in my coverage, yeah, I would definitely plan my calendar like that.
mm,
Um, it's a real individual decision, but just kind of taking a broad brush and thinking of maintaining coverage when you come back to the US, your international plans are just that, international plans meant to cover you outside of the United States, period. There are some plans that are not even going to cover you for one day back into the United States. They just do not enter into the realm of what what the US insurance world and cost are. They just don't even go there. So
wow.
yeah, think of your international insurance as just that. It's really meant for you outside of the US.
Mm,
Again, some policies will cover you for those short stints back. You know, again, you have to make sure yours does. And one thing I do want to mention because of COVID, um, with policies, don't assume that all carriers are including COVID-19 just yet, because they
mm,
are not. They're not all automatic. It's not, it hasn't been done. This is why, as a broker, I'm constantly having to look at the updates and look at what's changing. So, and also don't assume that it's covering you for a mandatory quarantine.
oh,
Because,
wow.
yeah, so let's say you arrive in a country and um, you wasn't expecting for them to say, we're going to transport you over to this hotel and you're going to have to stay here for 7 days.
Yeah, and a lot of them are doing it now. Canada, Thailand, and I think the UK is also considering that because of the new strain there.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that
yeah,
is reality.
yeah. So a lot of policies are not covering the mandatory quarantining. They are covering the COVID diagnosis, the care, your health care, your
Mm,
treatment. That's what they're covering if they include COVID. Okay.
mhm.
You want to make sure when you select the policy that it is not excluding COVID. Okay, you want to make sure it's not excluding it. And if it's including it, you just want to make sure, okay, yes, I see it, it's covered. Because even if you went into the link that you're providing and you were selecting, let's say, a travel plan today because you were going somewhere, um, as you are customizing it, you'll come up with options. Okay, the first two, I believe, does not include COVID. You
Mm,
have to make sure you select the one that includes COVID. So really, it's important to really not to take your time and read what it's including.
yeah.
They're making it clear. They're not hiding it. So it's not like you got to read through pages of a fine print, really. If it's included, they're letting you know up front. It's usually going to be in bold print,
Yeah.
bullet pointed. But it is something to be mindful of, especially if you are getting ready to travel. And another thing that I've heard, that even though, like, I provided a list of countries that are clear and have already put out the directives that they are not letting anyone in without the health insurance, there are other countries that people are not finding out this until they get there.
Wow. Yeah, and that's unfortunate because you want to go on, let's say, because I've been considering it actually a few times, going on vacation. I'm like, oh, is it worth the hassle? Because I don't want to get swabbed. And then what if I have to quarantine? And then you thinking, oh, I'm going for, 5 days or whatever. So my daughter can go to her dad's, the dog can be boarded. And then it becomes a 3-week endeavor because you land and then they're like, oh, mandatory
You
quarantine
have to
because
quarantine. Yeah.
out
Yeah.
from the
Yeah.
US and
Yeah.
at your own expense. And
Yeah,
so now,
or
you know,
we have some documents for you to sign
true.
to
I know.
waiving any liability on us, or we're going to send you over to this office before you can get through customs, and you're going to have to buy health insurance right here in this office
Mm,
because we're not letting anyone in with the health insurance. It's
yeah. Mm.
that sort of thing that's
It's
happening.
important to read the fine print. I just remember last year, and that was my last international trip. I went to Australia and New Zealand, and and my cousin and I, this was a trip we did together. And leading up to it, she's in Texas, I'm in New Jersey, and we were really paying attention to the wildfires because that was really what was going on in Australia. And I was like, oh, I gotta get some, travel insurance because, you know, the wildfires, I believe, started in like September of last year. And then
Yeah.
we started getting to the back or of 2019, I should say, now that we're in 2021.
Yes.
But
Yes.
but as we started getting to the tail end of 2019, then there was the talk of COVID. And I was like, okay, now I have to get it. And then because I had gotten it before it was labeled a pandemic, I was covered. And now, yes, I was covered for that trip. And I had, another trip planned later in the year that is now moved to this year, hopefully, fingers crossed. But one of the things that I realized is I didn't get the cancel for any reason. And I also had, come back to the States, had started a new job, and then 3 weeks later was sent home because of COVID. And then 3 months after that, we all got terminated. So I'm like, oh, okay, now, the policy has a you lose your job and, exclusion. But the nuance there was like, oh, well, you had to have been in that role for a year in order to be able to be covered. So there's so much fine print. And all that is to say, there's so much fine print that, it's not like one of those click the button and accept cookies or, where
Right.
kind of glance over things. Like these
Right.
are decisions that can have material impact on
Yes.
your day-to-day ability to move about or
Yes.
decisions related and impacts related to your financial picture. And I spent a lot of time paying attention
Yeah.
to my financial picture and planning that.
Yes.
But it's just to illustrate the importance of taking the time, really being strategic, really getting good
Yeah.
counsel. And I hope everyone is getting value out of this conversation today.
I
Um,
do too. I
yeah.
mean, I think that's why I said from the beginning, I was really happy that you saw this as an important topic and that you brought it to your group because I think it's important. I mean, you know, but yeah, you just don't want to see us running into unnecessary challenges,
Hmm.
um, when it's really about what you say. You keep using the key word strategy. It should just be part of your strategy. Um, it's more important. I would think it's more important to let's say hypothetically, the plan that you need costs you an additional $100 a month.
Hmm.
It is so worth it. It
Yeah.
is so incredibly worth it.
Yes.
It's like, look, just factor that in. That's,
Mhm.
your hair appointment. I don't know. Just
Yeah.
factor it in.
Cell phone bill, whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
It's critical. And if we have time, I would like to just touch on income protection as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Since
absolutely. I think we're doing pretty well on time, and then I know
okay.
like maybe one other question that we didn't get to, but yeah, let's talk
Okay.
about income protection.
Okay.
I
Cuz
want
I
to know.
think
I want to know.
I have this thing of women, building wealth internationally, and it's a whole long-term game for me. Um, and income protection is part of it, because a lot of times when we go outside of the country, we are oftentimes going because of a job. Maybe we got an offer to work abroad or something. But even when it's not that, because I think we're even going to see a decline actually in international companies extending those offers. And that's only because
Mhm.
a lot of countries are being pressured to hire from within, because the economic impact that has occurred because of COVID. So they're saying, look, hire within, don't go outside. It's a whole thing. And then remote work is also another factor that, we don't have to bring maybe everyone into the country. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. Income protection, the way it works is like it's like international unemployment insurance.
Hmm.
So if you um, get a diagnosis, or for any reason are unable to report to work, you get a temporary disability.
Mhm.
That's one of our terms here in the US, right? Temporary disability. You are temporarily disabled, you broke your leg, or you got a diagnosis, you got to undergo treatments, or you whatever, you're temporarily disabled. And so you're not drawing your full income. Well, if you have an income protection policy, then up to 75% of your income can be replaced by that policy while you're out of work. Now, one of your members mentioned waiting periods. Now, for income protection, there is a waiting period.
Wow.
I Okay, either 3 months or 6 months is typical.
Mhm.
Okay, so once you get past that deferment period, is what they really call it. Then you start receiving checks up to 75% of your salary while you are out of work. So it's like your international unemployment insurance. For a family,
Mhm.
even for a single person, but especially for families, or just single moms or whatever, that could be the difference on you having to move back home. That's
So true.
how
That's
I look at
so
that.
true.
If all of a sudden I'm working and now I've lost my income, how do I stay in this country?
Mm. Yes.
And I can't work.
Mm.
So that's the kind of risk that you're protecting with the income protection. Now, there is a age thing. You can't apply for it. You have to be under 55.
Okay.
Under 55 for the income protection insurance. And it only covers for incomes up to like 145,000, 144,000.
Got it.
Um, but in a nutshell, that's what it will cover. So imagine, you're working overseas, and your company does all these layoffs or terminations because of COVID.
Yeah, it
and
can.
you really didn't want to come back to the US, you kind of, it's like, okay, like I always say, had I had the foresight of COVID happening, I would have stayed in Barcelona and just wrote it out there. You
Mm,
know,
yeah,
I would have wrote it out there
that's how I feel
then.
about New Zealand. I'm like, man, 2 more weeks, I would have just been chilling there. Trying to
Okay, I
fend
just
for the
wish I would have
child.
known. I wish I would have known. I would have stayed put. Oh gosh.
Nobody knew it was gonna be this long.
Nobody knew. My budget would have stayed nice.
You
I would
know?
have said, I'm like here just spending money to
Oh
breathe.
man, but that's the thing. It's like I think we're laughing, but the real thing here is no one has a crystal ball, and so while you might go abroad and have a greater quality of life, right? That's what we're all aspiring to obtain, but also a lower cost of living. The reality is, and at least I can speak for myself, when I journey abroad, I also will have a daughter who will be in college. And while I am, fortunate that I'll be making my move debt free, I will still have, financial obligations that I would need to cover for her education. And so while my cost of living expenses might be like little, I also still have to keep in mind that I have other obligations in the States.
Yeah.
And so I think what I am taking away from the illustration that you have on the income protection is being mindful of what your picture really is and what those obligations are, so that you're able to say, okay, if I have to exist on 75% of what I'm making in this country, does that allow me to continue to live here, as well as, if this applies to you, tend to those additional obligations that I may have back in my home country?
You hit it on the head. You hit it on the head. Exactly. Exactly that. All of that.
I was hoping I could summarize. I know Francis had a question, and I know we're getting up against time. Francis asks, do the policies cover prescriptions that you take on a regular basis? Which that one definitely applies to me.
Yes.
Oh, great.
That's
That's
the
good
short
to
answer.
know. That's good to know. Yeah, because I'm like, oh my goodness, I gotta take my statins.
See, that's one of those things where when I said, the way we used to look at travel insurance, covering those trip cancellations and delays and the right, and the baggage and whatever, versus the travel health insurance. The travel health plan, you can look at it like your health plan in the
Mm,
US.
yes.
Like, are your prescriptions covered? Yeah. Is
Yeah.
that emergency room covered? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have a copay? Depending on your plan, I can pick a plan with zero copays and never put out a dime.
Wow.
Okay. Or do I mind having a copay?
Mhm.
Um, do I want to only have a deductible of $250, or do I want to have a deductible up to $1,000? It's very similar. The whole front part of it is so similar to how you're picking your insurance here in the U.S.
True,
It
true.
really is.
In your car insurance, like
It,
how much can you absorb
how much can you?
versus
Right.
how much do you want to like basically protect your assets from, right?
Exactly.
Your car insurance is like, oh, my deductible
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
$1,000. Okay, I'll pay $1,000, towards it.
Exactly.
Because I don't want to have to pay $10,000 in the
Right.
event that something happens.
Yeah.
So
It's
just
just
really making that parallel.
Yeah, the international plan is going to add on some things like it's going to add on repatriation things like if you need to be or if you're ambulatory and need to be brought back, if you need to evacuate a country, it's going to have that type of additional add-ons to it, ensuring that you are, again, the language barrier non-existent with these policies. They're making sure you are talking to English speaking
Mm,
doctors. They're making sure that your whatever standard of care your plan is covering, you are getting. What other things? A lot of them also add on term life insurance policies
mm.
with them. Um, those are some additional things that we're not accustomed to seeing in our health insurance at home. But these plans are super comprehensive. They cover a lot
Yeah.
for your dollar. In my opinion, when I compare apples to apples, I find that they cover way more in their plans than our plans do. Apples to apples.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I'm like, is it really apples to apples? Because
Right.
it just makes me want to go even more. But but also being very cognizant of the protection aspect because and I know probably sounded like beating a dead horse in terms of just really reinforcing that we can't see everything that could potentially happen. I mean, there were people that were stranded on cruise ships at the beginning of the pandemic because they were in international waters. And you have a boat with a bunch of people from a bunch of different countries. And they were like,
And they probably had travel insurance and not travel health insurance.
exactly. And they were like, well, you can't dock here. And it's like, oh, but I have COVID. Nope, we can't dock here.
You
And
see?
so you don't know what you could be potentially, and it's not to instill fear in people. It's
Right.
to underscore using real life examples that have
Yeah.
happened,
Yeah.
why these conversations are so important.
Yeah. Oh, and identity theft. These
Oh,
plans these plans also cover things like identity theft. They also cover lost passports.
mhm.
They also cover a lot of consulate services.
Hmm.
So they are very comprehensive.
That
They
is-
are different than your standard travel insurance.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've definitely taken an education here. I know, let's see, Adalia asked, does that income replacement insurance cover people who work for themselves like digital nomads? That's a great question.
That is an awesome question. And it depends on how you are set up. Okay.
Hmm.
If you are set up where you actually have yourself on payroll, yes. Okay. So be mindful of your structure, which
Mhm.
I'm sure, I think you even had someone talking about taxes. Be mindful of your structure
Mhm.
because how you are set up and how you handle your finances really does determine how you are being taxed, are taxed at all, what your write-offs are. And I don't want to get into a tax conversation. I'm not a tax professional, but I think, like you, I'm always looking at my finances.
Yes,
Okay.
all
Um,
day.
um, but yes, the income protection, if you have yourself on payroll, you are looked at as whatever your salary is, it will
Mhm.
replace up to 75% of that salary. Yes.
Oh, that is
Yes.
huge. That's a big distinction because, we're seeing these nomad visas come up. We're seeing countries like revisiting the whole, remote, as you were talking about earlier, and rethinking, whether or not it's justifiable for a company to bring, a colleague from a different country, et cetera. But as we look at nomads, I think there's also distinctions within that. So, you might be a digital nomad who's freelancing and then you're just getting, your checks and that's your salary, or to your point, having like an official structure and an entity and what that might look like in terms of a protection. So I think that's an awesome, awesome question. Um,
Absolutely.
and
Also, I want to make sure your members know that if you have had a positive diagnosis,
Mhm.
and you go to apply for your travel health insurance, your international health insurance, the length of time you have been in recovery is going to matter. You cannot apply if it's been like within 30 days. You're
Oh,
gonna you're gonna be denied.
interesting, interesting, interesting.
Okay. That kind of question is being put now into life insurance applications as well. Okay.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Oh my
Yeah.
God. So
And
much has
even
changed.
yeah, even for life insurance that has nothing to do with your international life insurance, because there's US life insurance and then there's also international life insurance as well.
Mm.
But even with the US carriers, now that question is hitting the applications. Have you had a positive COVID diagnosis? You answered yes. Have you been has the last date they're wording it, different companies are wording it differently, but
Mhm.
basically your recovery, if a doctor says yes, now you're negative, has it been more than 30 days from that date?
Whoa. Wow.
If you
That's huge.
say no, automatic knockout.
That is huge. I had no idea. I was like, wow. I like to think like I stay on top of things and be in the know, but it's like, wow, I had no idea. That's why I love these conversations because I just learned so much. And I feel very fortunate to kind of like sit in the seat to facilitate these conversations because gosh, it's like it's so educational and enlightening.
Yeah,
Wow. Yeah,
yeah.
I had no idea. And that has so many wide, implications because we don't know as we have these new strains of the virus coming up, different therapies and how those will evolve, whether those therapies give you complete immunity or whether you need boosters, or an annual thing like the flu shot. I think what keeps coming up again is that this situation is very fluid and it differs from carrier to carrier. It may differ from, well, we've talked about country to country. And so it is so important to one, protect yourself, but two, also make sure that you are getting the counsel of someone like Arnitha to guide you through it because no matter how much you stay on top of the news, we're inundated in the 24-hour news cycle. And so you want to have someone who's laser focused on a particular aspect that has material impact on your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know there is one, it looks like one last question from Lorinda. If you have a child using your travel health insurance, can you add the child to your policy, or do they need a separate plan if they are not able to have citizenship in the country they are born? They're not able to have citizenship.
That's stacked.
Uh,
Okay,
It's that last
so
part
I'm
that
gonna
I
take.
think.
Yeah, it was the last part. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
okay. So, okay, let me dissect that. I don't see it in writing. I wish I could see it so I could. Do I see it? So, okay, let me take the first part. First
Mhm.
off, you can add your children to your health insurance. So, yes, you can add your child to your policy. That's number one. Number two, you had a if, and let me see if I can see how you. Okay, or do you need a
Or
separate plan?
do they need a
Okay,
separate plan?
or do they need a separate plan if they are not able to have citizenship in the country they are born?
Yeah,
So
that was the
they are. Oh, and now forgive me if I do not remember the proper term. There is a term for stateless or countryless, like a person that
mm,
there is a proper term, and forgive me, I don't remember the proper term. And it sounds like you are saying, yes, they're your child, but they don't have citizenship anywhere in any country. Lorinda, can you answer that for me? Are you saying that you birthed the child, the person, if it doesn't have to be you personally, birthed the child, but the child was unable to become a citizen of the country they were born in? Is that what you're really saying? If you could answer that.
yeah, that would be helpful. That's the only, yeah, I think the real, that's the part that I think I'm also getting tripped up on. But if you're able to drop that in the chat, that we'd be happy to answer that. If
Hmm.
not, we can definitely
Hmm.
follow up
And
offline.
that is definitely something that again, I don't work for any of my carriers. I am not an underwriter for any of the carriers, and I am not I don't know everything. So when I get a question that I'm really not sure of, I defer to the carrier. I will go directly to the carrier, or send you directly to a carrier so you can hear from the horse's mouth. And this is probably going into that area that I will go, let me get some more information.
Mm-hmm. But I think the first part of the question is definitely like, yes, you can.
Yes,
That one
absolutely.
here, but if the other or applies, that may be something that you don't have to drop it into the chat. If it's too personal, we can also. So I think
Absolutely.
she said we're planning to have a child in China and might not have Chinese citizenship to put her on local health insurance. Got it. That makes sense. And I was reading this article, not to digress, but it was maybe a similar situation where the father wasn't a citizen and he was in Japan. And so there are nuances in certain countries in terms of how a child is assumes citizenship. So thank you for explaining that a little bit.
So my general understanding is, as long as that child is, as long as you are covered and your childbirth is covered, then when that child is born, that child is automatically covered.
Got it. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Because childbirth is covered. So yeah.
Awesome. Cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So and just to wrap, I know, first of all, I want to thank you, Arnitha, for your time, your expertise,
Absolutely.
and your willingness to answer these great questions. I want to thank everyone who was able to join because the questions were fantastic and the dialogue was really great. Just to kind of, close the loop on a few things. One, we will be sending the replay out because I know there are certain people that, because of time zones and different things like that, were not able to join live. Arnitha will be providing some follow-up material offline, so be on the lookout for that as well. And then also, if you are and have been inspired, which I hope you have been, to have a conversation to, get a quote on what your protection could look like, whether you're traveling or whether you're about to make your journey abroad or your exploration trip, whatever the case may be. There is a link that is in the chat. And so if you would like to do that, you can click on that if you're in the actual chat live. If you're in the replay, I will also send that link out to you, and then you can run through and look at different scenarios. So I just wanted to say that this was an awesome, awesome, awesome session.
That's good. And again, if I make myself available to answer questions all the time, I don't mind at all. So I know it's a convoluted area in some cases. So feel free to reach out, ask questions, join my mailing list. Yeah, and I'll help in any way that I can.
Awesome. And I will, like I said, I will send everything out to everyone as soon as all the files download and process. And I just wanted to thank you again. And so, everyone,
Thank you.
Get ready for, another episode of the sessions. Be on the lookout for that. More to come, and hopefully more to conversations with Arnitha, because I'm sure, as things change, I'm feeling like we're gonna have to do this again.
I know. I said I was going to start, I was going to do a blog to talk about some of the changes. I just know that once I kind of approach some of the changes, I'm going to have to be at least updating the changes at least once a month, once every 2 weeks or so, because it is so fluid. But but we need the information.
Absolutely.
We need it. We need
Absolutely.
it.
So
Yeah.
thank you again. And
thank you.
on the flip side, bye everybody.
Okay. Bye. Happy travels.
Yes.
Blaxit.
Yes.